Good morning, students. Here we are. We did just get word from the ODA board that we will not be meeting live in class for the rest of the year. So, really breaks my heart not to be able to see y'all again until next year, hopefully. So, um, anyway, let's get started on Module 15. Okay, it's Lab 30, page 95 in your student activity book. Here we go. All right, our first blanks right up there at the top of the page is that the two major resources of the ocean, because we're looking at food now and how we manage the ocean and our resources there, are fish and shellfish. There's a picture of various things we like to eat from the ocean, which reminds me, we're supposed to have a fish dinner here. So next week when I put that lecture together, I probably will cook a few things and, yeah, show you how I cooked them at least, okay? Yeah. All right. So the food that we get from the sea, here is a chart over here on the right that tells you that the largest group we utilize is, of course, fish. So you can see this large chunk right here. Most fish are harvested that are harvested for food are called fin fish, and we'll get into those in a minute. Then the next largest group are going to be our mollusks. So our crustacean and shellfish. So I'm trying to say shellfish, which include mollusk and crustaceans. Okay. So notice we have other, and I don't see any other on there. So and aquatic plants, things like seaweed and kelp and that kind of thing. This is just from a previous lecture. Remember talking about the primary production areas and all the dark areas near the coasts. So we're going to see a little bit of a mirroring of this sort of map because primary production is, that's the plants and the algae and that kind of thing. That lends toward there being a lot of fish in the same area, right? Because they have a good choice of food there. At the end of the lecture, you're going to see another map that you'll find in your book that we're going to do a little assignment on for our thing. Okay, so the first group we're going to talk about are the clupioid fishes, and we've actually studied about these a little bit so far. Okay, these are our sardines and anchovies, and another group called herring. So they tend to be in huge schools, so they're caught like with nets and things like this fairly easily. There's millions of them in the schools, so there's tons and tons of them. They are plankton feeding fish, which we learned about in a previous module. So the sardines and the anchovies, namely. So we just have some more. There's a big group of them right there, right? It's probably being chased by some sort of predator. And now we have our gadoid fishes, our large bottom-dwelling fish like cod, pollock, haddock, and something called a hake, I guess. Here's some pictures of some of them. All right, so I don't know if you've tried any of these guys right here. Certainly cod is very popular. If you don't know, the codfish industry was what pretty much started America being a world trading partner. So the guys who were up there in Massachusetts traded with the rest of the world with the incredible codfish that they have in that part of the ocean. I've certainly have had haddock before, which is this one down here. This guy, oyster toadfish, interesting. And some of these I've never heard of. A cusk I've never heard of. A burbot, I've never heard of that right there. Lota. Other types of main catch would be the gadoid fish would be redfish. That's plentiful in the coast of Texas here. So and we can find that really easily around our areas in like the seafood stores and things like this. Bass, rockfish, flounder, and halibut. You've probably heard of all of those. You've probably tasted all of those. And then we have our open ocean, which would be the big ones, the yellowfin and big-eye tuna. Those are the big tunas out there. Albacore is also a kind of tuna. And so these are, massively large fish. And I know you've had that tuna. I know albacore is probably one of the most popular to put into the can, so canned tuna. And then the skipjack's another big tuna. Best fishing grounds, we can see here kind of mirroring that map I showed you earlier, right? So around the primary producer, so you can see lots of areas. Look, it's really pretty thick right here, right? So Japan is over here, and we know Japan is a very much seafood eating nation. That's their primary food because they're an island, and they don't have much farmland, so they do a lot of eating of fish. And then along the coastal regions right there. In the USA, however, we're looking at our top ports with the seafood that gets harvested there. So we can see up in Alaska, looks here, that's our highest volume right there. If you've ever had wild caught salmon, oftentimes it'll say, you know, Alaskan salmon, and it's really good stuff. It's probably some of the best salmon out there, and you can see just in various areas. So here's the you know, out on the Aleutians here, some good fishing out there, and the Kodiak Island, and so mostly out here, yeah. Okay, then we have Massachusetts. I mentioned them earlier as far as the codfish goes. Okay, it says their highest value. How about that? Virginia coast right here. I know that they do also a lot of crabs and stuff, like in the Chesapeake Bay area. Down here near us in Louisiana, we'll probably have some different types of fish, the redfish in particular. They also do a lot of oyster and clams out here in our coast, in our Gulf of Mexico. Up Oregon, more cold water fish, and look, out in Hawaii. How about that? All right. So those are where we have most of our volume of fishing here in the U.S. We're going to look now at how do we catch these guys. Okay, if we're a commercial fisherman, I will tell you this, there is such a thing as line fishing. I mean, you know, with a rod and a reel. Commercially, that is actually still something that is done. Some of the salmon in particular get caught that way. So there's professional guys out there with their rod and reel catching fish for us, you know, commercially. But mostly commercial fishing is done in large quantities using types of nets. Okay, so we're going to be looking at each type of these nets. I think you're supposed to write these down in your book. The purse seine is usually for catching the clupioids. You remember these are the small, you know, the the small ones in giant schools, right? So our anchovies and things like this. So you can imagine that a net would be easy to catch those guys. A trawl is pulled behind a boat, and so we find the ones deeper down, the gadoid, okay, the ones that are on the bottom. Our long lines will catch tuna and some other big fish, and then our gill nets, anything that pretty much gets tangled in there. So we'll look at each one of these. We'll look at the pros and the cons. Some of these probably should be outlawed. You can make that decision after watching a few of our videos today. This is a shrimp trawler, so those are very common for the shrimp catch. When we were supposed to be on our little field trip out to the coast, we would have got on a type of a trawler, and we would have dragged a trawling net behind it. We would have done a couple of things. The trawling net, we would have done a deep and a middle catch, and they would have pulled that up, and we would have seen all this cool stuff that was caught in that, and then we would have, you know, thrown it back in. And the other thing we would have done was a mud grab, where we reached down with the mud, which we talked about in a previous module. Sadly, we didn't get to do that. Yeah. How does a trawler work? Here you go. You can see they're dragging that net behind. Notice, let me go back here real quick, how they have these things way up here, right? So they can have the nets being drawn up high, all this rigging you can see, and that's because they would probably have multiple nets out. All right, so we're going to have the width here. Look how that nice open mouth right there going to a narrow area to catch the critters in there. Here they're bringing it aboard and dropping it on. So what does that look like? It's hard to tell. Notice the birds. The birds are thinking they're going to get a little bycatch there, right? We can also do the trawl on the floor. So they weight these down with weights, and they drag them along the floor of the ocean. Typically not terribly deep, right? So you can see here's the boat. Look how massive it is. There's the giant boat. This thing is huge. And so it's, you know, the door, and then we have the weights on the bottom and the floats on the top. The weights usually have types of rollers with them so that they can be pulled along. And then everything, you know, the critters get pulled into here and get trapped in that little deal right there. This may make us not want to ever have seafood again, right? Let's watch it.
This video, courtesy of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, shows you how a trawl is used. A trawl rolls along the seafloor, collecting both benthic organisms like crustaceans, as well as the larger gadoid fishes that live near the ocean bottom. The use of a trawl can be bad for the marine environment in at least two ways. First, as you're seeing in this video, it does do damage to the seafloor. Of course, there are several natural processes that cause damage to the seafloor as well, and the seafloor is designed to recover. Nevertheless, overuse of trawls can present a real problem. Second, trawls are very indiscriminate. They catch everything in their path. We use only some of what's in the trawl, so in the end, a lot of animals die needlessly.
Okay, yeah, that looked pretty violent there on the bottom of the seafloor. This was interesting. A couple years ago, this was made the news because there was a trawler off the Gulf of Mexico, and this is an item that ended up in their net. So it's a rare species of shark. It's called a pocket shark. You might think it's pocket shark because it's so small. I think it just might be a baby. I think I have another picture here that shows apparently, is it this right here? I think it's this. It's like a little, well, that's where it got its name. It's like a little pocket behind their fin right there. So sadly, of course, it did not survive this trawl pickup here. But notice it's a little guy there, really cute. So very, very rare. Okay, close up. I'm thinking that's the pocket, I think. Okay. Here's another one, and they have shown, here's a trawler not dragging. Okay, this is just a regular trawler. And when you catch something you're not supposed to catch, that's called bycatch. And in this particular case, we've worked out, some people have tried to figure out a way to help some of those creatures get out. Okay, so in this particular case, you catch a turtle accidentally, and there's an escape door that they hopefully can get out. Because think about a turtle. If I catch a turtle in a net and I keep dragging and dragging and dragging, the turtle needs to breathe, right? So it can actually end up drowning in there, and that's just sad. We don't use turtles commercially, as far as I know. Let's see what this short video is. Oh, okay, I see. It's got that little grate that kind of forces that turtle out. There you go. All right, so at least, we're trying to come up with some options, right? Okay, moving on to the purse seine. Okay, so we can see how this works is that they would put the net out, and then they would close it around, okay, like a drawstring purse, right, and pull it in. Remember, our clupioid fishes are often caught this way. There it is, kind of round about them, and then scooping the whole thing up. Let's watch it.
Fishermen use purse seine nets to capture schooling fish like tunas, salmon, and anchovies. Sometimes fishing vessels deploy floating rafts called fish aggregating devices, also called FADs, to attract fish in the open ocean. Large nets encircle the school of fish, as well as other animals that may be attracted to the FAD. The bottom of the net is drawn shut to prevent the fish from escaping, and then the nets and the fish are gathered into the fishing vessel. When purse seiners use FADs, the accidental catch of juvenile fish, sharks, and other vulnerable animals can be a serious conservation concern. By eliminating the use of FADs, purse seiners can significantly reduce the number of animals that are accidentally caught by this fishing method.
Okay, so you see that there is a definite move toward the sustainability situation. All right, here we have the long lines. All right, these are set out to sound like what they are. All right, they sent out a long line. There are some floats here, and then these are being held down, and they literally have hooks on them with bait on them. So you can see here, the big problem with this, of course, is that bycatch, there's a lot of bycatch, so ones we don't want, right? So, I mean, look, this one even has like how'd that get there? A bird down underneath there. So here we have, the turtle. So this is very frowned upon these days. Let's see.
Long-line vessels deploy miles of fishing lines in the open ocean in pursuit of fish like mahi-mahi, tunas, and swordfish. These vessels have the capacity to set up to 50 miles of baited hooks that can be left to soak overnight or for several days. Along with capturing the target fish, the hooks may also ensnare a variety of ocean animals, including sharks, endangered sea turtles, seabirds, and marine mammals. Fishermen can take measures to reduce the accidental capture of some of these ocean animals. Setting the fishing lines deeper allows many animals to swim over the top. A specially designed fishing hook, called a circle hook, can make it easier to release an animal that's accidentally been caught. Adding streamers above the water can scare away seabirds and save them from being caught on fishing hooks. Effective fishing gear modifications like these can reduce the impacts of longline fishing on ocean wildlife.
Okay, there we go. Gill nets, I think you had that written down as catching pretty much anything that happens to swim by, right? So, like it sounds, you know, they're caught in there, and here's a drifting one and then a set one. So the set one would be anchored down or weighted down in some way, and then the drift one would be just behind the boat right there. So here we can see it, and these fish are just swimming along, and all of a sudden, next thing they know, they're stuck in the net, you know, and so you can say caught by their gills, basically. We'll watch it.
Gill nets are walls of netting designed to entangle fish. These nets can also accidentally catch ocean animals like sea turtles, marine mammals, and sharks. Fishermen can take measures to reduce this accidental catch by setting the nets deeper in the water column to allow room for animals to swim over, and adding gear like pingers, which warn passing marine mammals. Fishermen can reduce the adverse impacts of this type of fishing gear on ocean wildlife.
Okay, hopefully most of the fishermen are doing things like that. Okay, so here is like a tuna catch. Notice on the left we have some, you know, smaller tuna right there, but on the right, see, most of them are these massive fish. And I think in a future, like in the next week or the next couple weeks, we'll talk about the big fish and how they actually can have some toxins associated with them. But tuna, of course, is a big industry, huge. You know, you think about all those little cans of tuna, it's all from there. Okay, so renewable resources are a blessing. That's ones that can be, you know, so fish reproduce, right? So as long as we don't overfish and fish them out of existence, then we can continue to have sustainable harvests of fish. So here's some things you're going to write down. Okay, our sustainable yield is the amount of individuals in a population that can be caught without reducing the size of the population, or letting it grow, so kind of keeping it even. And the maximum sustainable yield is the amount that can be harvested that's not going to threaten the long-term size of the population. Okay, so we can still get them. We might deplete it somewhat, but it won't decimate them completely. All right, so you're going to write these things down. If you need a little more time, you can pause the video here. Shellfish are the second most important food sources. These would include shrimp, crab, lobsters, oysters, mussels, scallops, octopus, and squid. And so catching these are a little different, right? A lot of these guys are on the bottom of the ocean, or even sessile, like with the oysters and things like that. So let's see how we, what was that question there? Can using these resources be done in a responsible manner? I would say yes. Through a process called fisheries management. You can actually go to college and get a degree in fisheries management. I would assume that Texas A&M has this degree plan. They're all about the ag and everything, so they do a lot of this kind of thing. And so what we would do there is we would try to figure out how do we continue to have an industry. In other words, don't give up eating fish. God did give fish to us for food. All right, so we're just needing to be responsible with the way that we harvest them. So those net changes that we just talked about in these videos, that's a good thing. We could try to enhance production. We're going to see, especially next week, we'll see a lot about fish farming and stuff like this, okay? And anyway, just several techniques to try to keep the populations up. All right, so the resources of the ocean are plentiful but limited and must be managed, right? We have something known as exclusive economic zones, or EEZ, in any country. It's the area offshore of that country that belongs to them, and they have complete control over those resources. So it turns out, so a certain distance away from the shore, like from the United States shore, belongs to the U.S., and fishermen from other countries cannot come fish there. But at a certain point out of the coastal areas, down in the deep ocean, that belongs to everyone. We're looking at 200 nautical miles, about 230 miles out of the coast of the USA. You can see it here in this picture. Okay, so this is the USA zones right here. We can see all through the Gulf, right? That goes out that far, and then I would assume all this would be Mexico. Maybe somewhere in the middle would be everybody. What do we have? Puerto Rico right here. Along the coast, along this coast. On Hawaii and Guam and our islands out there. All these islands apparently. American Samoa. Alaska, obviously, right here, all around Alaska. That's interesting, right? That must be some special region right there. Maybe this is Russia, so that's maybe Russia zone right there. Okay. Let's watch this.
This is a fish. Some fish are wild, which means a fisherman caught them out of the ocean. Other fish are farmed, which means they were raised in an enclosed aquaculture system, like a cow farm, but in the water. And there are endless fish in the sea, right? Wrong. Let's start with the wild ones. Wild fish are being caught in a way that cannot last. 85% of the world's fisheries are currently being overtaxed, meaning wild fish are being caught at a faster rate than they can reproduce. Here's another problem that comes up with wild fish. Some fishing methods catch all kinds of additional sea life that end up dying as a result. This is called bycatch. For instance, trawls get dragged along the ocean floor, disrupting the ecosystem and catching sea turtles and unwanted fish. Long lines snag tons of innocent bycatch as well. These methods are definitely not sustainable. A wild fish is sustainable if it's caught in a way that doesn't threaten the long-term survival of its species or the ecosystem it's a part of. Hook and line fishing, harpooning, and some uses of traps are often more sustainable methods of catching fish. With these methods, bycatch is minimal and unwanted fish can be released. Okay, so now let's talk about fish farms. Seems like they're happy places, right? Well, not always. Some farmed-raised fish are from poorly run fish farms. They pollute the oceans with their waste. They also risk releasing their fish into the wild, and since farm fish are often genetically different from wild fish, this can change the wild populations and upset the natural ecosystem. A sustainable farm is careful about keeping their fish separate from wild populations, what they feed their fish, and what they're putting in the ocean. So, you're partial to your sushi, but you don't want to be a selfish jerk. What can you do? Well, if you're going to eat fish, make sure it's sustainable. Sustainability is on a fish-by-fish basis, so being responsible takes a little bit of work, but it's worth it. Here's how you find sustainable fish without having to memorize a long list of options. First, check the label. For farmed fish, look for the Aquaculture Stewardship Council logo. And for wild fish, look for the Marine Stewardship Council logo. Next, try to shop at supermarkets that only stock fish from responsible farms and fisheries. The best options are Whole Foods, Safeway, Wegmans, and Trader Joe's. Finally, download Monterey Bay Aquarium's app, Seafood Watch. Then when you shop, you can enter the name of any fish and know whether or not to buy it. This is a sustainable fish. Let's keep it that way.
Okay, so maybe a little preachy, but the idea here is if we all, work together, we will keep fish forever, right? So we just need to. Our big problem here is that we may fish so much that we don't have any fish left. All right, so your lab today is on page 96 of your student activity guide. Okay, so when you turn over, we should have filled in all those blanks, right? Yeah. You'll turn it over, you'll see a map on there on page 96, and you're going to go into your textbook, and it will give you, I'm not exactly sure what page it is on your textbook, but it will give you the instructions on how to fill this out. You're essentially going to be looking at the fishing areas of the world. You'll be coloring those in with certain colored pencils, dark blue, light blue, that kind of thing. And so just follow the instructions on that, and that will be your lab. And how about that? That's all we have for today. Yeah. So that was a short lecture. I'm sure that you're happy to have that. Okay, remember we're going to be getting together at class time this week on Tuesday at 10:30, right? And just a little time to chat and see what's up with y'all. Okay? You may have some questions, particularly about how we're going to end the year and the final and stuff like that. So hopefully I'll have those answers for you. Okay, gang. I'll be excited to see y'all then. Bye.